The Torah reading this week is Chaye. And Chaye is a focused narrative which we're all probably familiar with. So we'll just go over the arc of the Parsha very quickly, and then we're going to dig in. The title of this class this week is Seeing Our True Colors, which is an important idea because obviously if a person wants to, if a person wants to, if a person wants to improve their character and grow as a human being, then knowing yourself and knowing what you're really all about and what makes you tick is vitally important. It'd be like trying to improve a property without first evaluating what needs to be addressed and what areas need to be fixed up and what areas are strengths and what areas are weaknesses. So that's what we're going to look at this week. But the narrative is very, it begins recording the death and the passing of Sarah, the wife of Abraham, who passes away at 127 years old. It goes on to detail how Abraham purchases the Me'orat HaMachpelah in Hebron, a site that's well known to the world and to the Jewish people. At the time, it didn't have a big building on it, but it was a field, and the edge of the field had a cave in it. And that cave had compartments, dual compartments, pairs of compartments. And that's why it was called Me'orat HaMachpelah. He purchased it from Ephron, who is a member of Bnei Chet, of the people that lived in that region. And then immediately, Abraham turns his attention to finding a suitable wife for Yitzchak, who is 40 years old at the time. He dispatches Eliezer, his servant, and we have an extremely lengthy, detailed chapter 24, which is going to talk about all the steps and all the conversation that Eliezer has in traveling back to Haran, where Abraham traveled to Canaan from, and meeting Rivka at the well, and her agreeing to come back with him, and her coming back, and her moving into the tent that Sarah, who had passed away, occupied, and she and Yitzchak becoming married. And then we have, the note that Abraham remarries Keturah, who by tradition is the same person as Hagar, the maidservant he was married to before. Records the fact that Abraham died at the age of 175 years old, and it talks a little bit about the genealogy of Yishmael. And that's the end of this week's Parsha. It's a relatively short Torah reading with 105 verses in it, and that's what it contains. Now, let's make sure we get the narrative clear here. And I want to do some reading about that. But to set the stage, here's the stage that we're looking at. Abraham, if Sarah is 127 years old, that means it has been 57 years from the time that Abraham and Sarah left and came to the land of Israel. 40 years after Isaac was born, which happened 25 years after they arrived there. But if Abraham was 75 when he left, and he's 10 years older than Sarah, then Abraham is 137 years old when his wife passes away. Now, if you think about this moment, what's very noteworthy and important to think about is the following. All the promises that God made, all the blessings, this land will be an inheritance for you, it'll be yours throughout eternity, you'll receive blessing. All of these promises from God were still rather theoretical. Abraham, who was promised to be the progenitor of a great nation that would last through history, has one child, and that child is not married. He's a nomad in a strange land, which is the way he's described by the people of the place. And he's very vulnerable. He owns nothing. He's a wealthy man in terms of his flocks, but he really owns nothing. And he's wandering around in the land. So if it was you or me, and his wife passes away. So if it was you or me, it might be a good time to pause and think to ourselves, gee, is God ever going to deliver on these promises? What happened to all the guarantees? Look at the difficulties that I've faced. But that's not who Abraham is. Instead, Abraham is going full bear ahead, counting on and trusting in everything that God has promised him. So therefore, when his wife passes away and he knows he's going to bury her here in the city of Hebron, he knows by tradition and prophecy that there's a special field and a special cave that she should be buried in. And he goes out to negotiate that purchase. And that's what we're going to pay attention to. At first, that's in chapter 23, close to the beginning of the Parsha, page 106, 107 in the Stone Chumash. And we'll pick up the narrative from number 3. Avram rose up from the presence of his dead, his deceased wife, and spoke to the children of Chaye, saying, I am an alien and a resident among you. Grant me an estate for a burial site with you, that I might bury my dead from before me. So here's this, if you wanted to cast it in a certain way, here's this Nebuch old man going to the local population at their mercy, so to speak, and saying, look, I need a place to bury my wife. Give me a break. And the children of Chaye answered Avram. They answered very graciously, hear us, my Lord. You are a prince of God in our midst. In the choicest of our burial places, bury your dead. Any of us will not withhold his burial place from you, from burying your dead. Avram rises up, sentence 7. He bows to them out of appreciation. And he says in sentence 8, if it is truly your will to bury my dead from before me, heed me and intercede for me on behalf of Ephron, the son of Sochar. Let him grant me the cave of Machpelah, which is his, on the edge of his field. Let him grant it to me for its full price in your midst as an estate for a burial site. So clearly Abram here is negotiating, but he's making something very, very clear. I'm not looking for favors. I'm not looking for handouts. I'm looking for ownership. I've lived in this land now for 57 years. I don't own anything. I live off the land as a nomad. I'm very meticulous, not to steal from anybody, not to allow my sheep to graze in anybody's field. But I'm at your mercy. But I want it to be clear that I want to acquire this site for eternity. Ephron is sitting in the midst of the people, picking up the narrative on page 107 in the Stone Chumash, sentence 10. And Ephron says very grandiosely, and turn over the page in sentence 11, no, my Lord, heed me. I've given the field to you already. It's yours. As for the cave that is in it, I give it to you too. In the view of my children, of my people, I have given it to you. Bury your dead. Very gracious. Abram bows down in appreciation and then says to him, rather, if only you would heed me, I will give the price of the field, accept it from me, that I may bury my dead there. And Ephron replies, my Lord, heed me, land worth 400 silver shekels between me and you. What is it? Bury the dead. Sentence 16, Abram heeds Ephron. He weighs out 400 silver coins, hands it to him. And Ephron's field, which was in the Machpelah facing Mamre, the field and the cave within it, and all the trees in the field within it and its surrounding boundaries, was confirmed. They recorded it properly as Abraham's, as a purchase in the view of the children of Chaye among all who came to the gate of the city. And afterwards, only after the deed was recorded and the full price was paid, then Abraham buries his wife there. And we know that we can travel to Hebron today and we can go to the Marat Machpelah. We go to the building, which was built originally as a church, then as a mosque. Today it exists as a mosque over these burial sites. And we're standing above the entryway to where the cave was. And the original field was just a sloping field with a cave at the end. Abram acquires it, records the deed, and buries his wife. Now, we don't know the value of currency at the time, but by all accounts in Jewish tradition, 400 silver coins was an absolutely exorbitant amount to pay, above and beyond anything anybody could have imagined paying it. The Wall Street Journal at the time would have had the headline, imagine some foreigner has acquired a field with a cave in it for 400 silver coins, it would be headline making throughout the land. So what's going on here? Well, first of all, from Avram's perspective, Avram is out to acquire a place in the land that will be clearly owned by him without doubt and without question, something that cannot be rescinded. Avram is a wealthy man. It's not a question of him not being able to afford the 400 silver coins. Ephron is a wealthy person. As he says, people like you and me, what's the difference? So I want to play this out a little bit in current terms, and then I want to just dig in and understand the character of Ephron specifically, because Rashi has comments about the character of Ephron. I want to look at it a little differently, and this presentation is based totally on a very insightful talk I heard given by Rav Luchter, a very wise rabbi who lives in Jerusalem and who gives what he calls Musar Vadim discussion groups on the Parsha and in other areas of Torah. When Ephron acts magnanimously and says, I'll give you the field, you're an old man, you've lived amongst us, we recognize your greatness. Take whatever you want, please bury your dead. And Avram says, no, I want to acquire the field. So it is like a negotiation between two extremely prominent, wealthy individuals. So why do we come up with such an extravagant price? Avram says, I'm willing to pay anything you ask me. And that's the subplot here. And then Ephron responds, okay, I'll take, if you imagine buying a house, in a prime area that typically houses go for $20 million. And somebody says, fine, you can have the house. It's no problem. I'd love for you to move in. $150 million. $150 million. And then Avram says, fine, if that's what you are agreeable to, I will pay you the full price, because above anything else, I want there to be no cloud and no doubt on the fact that I own this land, so that I can bury my wife there. I could be buried there when I pass away. My son and his wife could be buried there. Even my grandson and his wife could be buried there. That's the tenor of the negotiations. In an interesting discussion, what you see from the rabbis is this. Ephron, it was not really about the money for him, because as exorbitant a price as it is, if you imagine, it wouldn't make headlines if one of the wealthiest people in the world, I don't know, name whichever one you want today, someone worth $50 billion were to do a transaction and earn $150 million. We'd say, oh, why is that in the paper? What's that's not a big deal. He probably spends more than that, refurbishing his yacht in between seasons. And that's, the reality of what we call the super rich today. But what's going on here is as follows. Abraham is intent on securing a place in the land in fulfillment of Hashem's promise to him that this will be his land and the land of his descendants. He wants no doubt to be there. Who's Ephron? Ephron starts off very magnanimously. He's not a swindler, but as the commentaries sort of play out here, he just thinks to himself, why shouldn't I take $150 million? I know it's worth 20, maybe 30 in a really up market, but why shouldn't I just take the money? After all, that's what I do. That's what I'm about. I'm an acquirer. I'm a person who makes good deals and makes a lot of money. And if I can make a total windfall here, as outlandish as it may sound, and even though some people might even accuse me of taking advantage of a person at a very tender moment when the person's lost his life and is looking for a burial site, I just can't help myself. That's who I am. So I'll take the $150 million. Cha-ching, Avram counts out what is recorded as 400 silver coins, a fantastic amount of money, unheard of at the time for that type of a property, and the deal is done. And once the deal is done, Avram buries his child. So I want to look at this. This is where the theme of this class comes up, seeing our true colors. as Rabbi Rav Luchter puts it, it really, adding 400 silver coins wasn't the significant deal for Ephron. But if I'm in a position where I can take advantage of a financial situation, that's who I am. That's what my true colors. That's what comes out within me. That's what I'm made of. That's what makes me tick. When I wake up in the morning and I jump out of bed, it's because, oh, here's an opportunity for me to build on my fortune, to show what a good business person I am, to show how I can navigate and negotiate the world better than other people. And probably true then, we certainly know it's true today. There's no limit to the accumulation of wealth beyond anybody's possible ability to make use of such wealth. But it becomes what makes me tick. And in this sense, the insight that we can take from this is the inner essence of Ephron. Doesn't make him into a terrible person. Doesn't make him into he's not a person who feeds off the poor, but it reveals the fact that when compared to a person like Abraham, who's built his life on chesed, on bringing an awareness of God to the world, on values that are very high-minded and very altruistic, and that are less about himself and more about others, it certainly places him in stark contrast to who Abraham is and what the true colors of Ephron are. And then the Parsha, with these glasses on, turns our attention to the effort to find a suitable wife for Yitzchak, for Abraham's only child, so that Yitzchak can build upon the spiritual, moral legacy that his father has created. He's going to dig the wells, so to speak, that his father has dug, and wells offer water to everyone who passes by. That's going to be Yitzchak's wife. We need a wife for him. So a little side discussion, we're not going to go into it here, but we're certainly not going to go back to Ephron and say, hey, maybe you have a daughter, maybe you have a granddaughter would be a good shidduch from my son, because it's oil and water. There's no way that Yitzchak could create a home that would recreate and build upon the legacy of the home that Abraham and Sarah had built together, unless he finds a wife who has those true colors within her to build on this legacy. So what do we get? We get Eliezer, the valuable the trusted servant, going out, traveling a long distance, albeit he travels with camels, he travels with presents, he's well-heeled as a representative of Abraham. You know, in modern day terms, his jet touches down in the airport in Haran, and he's clearly, representing people of means. And he hops off the camel or the plane, whatever analogy works for you. And then he's got to set about finding this person who has within her all the seeds of greatness and all of the ingredients it's going to take to continue Abraham and Sarah's work in the world of Tikkun Olam, of making people aware that there is one God and how beneficent God is, and how much God showers the world with kindness, and how therefore we're obligated to recognize God and to express thanksgiving and gratitude and to live within parameters which God feels are required of people to be considered moral people, and so that people could then be developing that aspect of themselves in imitation of God. So the first thing you and I would probably say is, well, we need a religious girl. We've got to check what Beis Yaakov she went to, how many times a day does she daven, how hard does she shake when she davens. None of those things are on the table. All the people there are not believers in God. The Ron describes them all as idolaters. We're not going to find that here. Okay, so the Torah is making a very big statement here. That's not the most important thing. Maybe that's not even so important altogether in this context. So what do we have to do? So Eliezer, the servant of Abraham, who has his insights in psychology and who's always lived in the house of Abraham and Sarah with his eyes wide open and has an understanding of what it takes to perpetuate such a home. And I would say parenthetically, Abraham went out of his way to tell Eliezer, don't think my son should marry anyone from here or even a Canaanite like you, because that's not going to work. So he has his marching orders. He comes back to the place where Abraham left to come to Israel, and he makes a very clear statement of what he's looking for. And let's look at this carefully, because Rav Luchter in his discussion absolutely upends all of my less well thought out insights in terms of what happens. And let's see what happens. Let's turn to page 111 in the Stone Chumash, chapter 24, sentences 12, 13, and 14. And he said, so Eliezer the servant says, Hashem, God of my master Abraham, may you so arrange it for me this day that you do kindness with my master Abraham. Behold, I am standing by the spring of water, and the daughters of the townsmen come out to draw water. Let it be that the young girl to whom I shall say, please tip over your jug that I may drink, and who replies, drink, and I will even water your camels, her will you have designated for your servant for Isaac, and may I know through her that you have done kindness with my master. Okay, this becomes a litmus test. It's a total mistake to think that this is some kind of rabbit's foot type of an approach. You know, if she wearing a blue dress with one shoe like this and one shoe, it's nothing like that. What he's saying is here is this is the inner core of the person. I need to seek out a suitable match to perpetuate the legacy of Abraham and Sarah in the next generation of Isaac and his wife to be. So I need someone who is going to approach me, and I will ask her, please tip over your jug so that I may drink. And she's going to reply, drink, and I will even water your camel. Somebody who's going to be unbelievably kind, thoughtful, beneficent, interested in other people, not worried about taking care of themselves when they see the need of someone else in front of them. That's the test he sets up. Let's see what happens. Sentence 17, we're on page 113 here. Now the maiden, so let's go back one. He just finished speaking. Rebecca was coming out, sentence 15. She had been born to Bethuel, the son of Milcah, the wife of Nahor, the brother of Abram, so they're related, with her jug upon her shoulder. Now the maiden was very fair to look upon, a virgin who no man had known. She descended to the spring, filled her jug and ascended. So she goes down to the spring, fills up her jug, climbs back up from where it is. The servant ran toward her and he said, let me sip, if you please, a little water from your jug. Now let's note right away, that's not what he said he was going to say. Okay, there's a discrepancy here. Because if you turn back a page, sentence 14, let it be that the maiden to whom I shall say, please tip over your jug so that I may drink, and replies, drink, and I will even water your camels. Sounds like it's going to be one thing. So he says this to her. Let me sip, if you please, a little water from your jug. She says, drink, my lord. And quickly she lowered her jug to her hand and gave him drink, took it off her shoulder. 19, when she finished giving him drink, she said, I will draw water even for your camels until they have finished drinking. So she hurried and emptied her jug into the trough and kept running to the well to draw water, and she drew for all his camels. Now, she did not say to Eliezer, drink, and I will also water your camels. What did she do? She said, he asked her for water. which we can imagine ourselves in such a position asking any stranger, I need a little water. Just arrived, just arrived in town. Can you give me a little water? She complies. She makes sure he drinks whatever he wants. And when she's finished giving him a drink, she then says, and I would put in parentheses here, noticing that there are also camels who have arrived with him. I'll even take care of them as well. And she goes ahead and does so. Now, and it says, by the way, sentence 21, the man was astonished at her, reflecting silently to know whether Hashem had made his journey successful or not. And it was when the camels had finished drinking. After she finished doing that, the man took a gold nose ring. Its weight was a bekan, 2 bracelets on her arms, 10 gold shekels was their weight. And he said, whose daughter are you? Then he first asked who she is. But he's already convinced that he's got the right person here because he sees what her inner character is. Now, what did he see? And this is where Rav Wuchter splits the narrative and emphasizes this detail to a great extent and says the following. It's not so unusual for people to do kindness. Someone stops me on the street and says, hey, this box is very heavy for me. I got to put it in my trunk. Would you mind helping me with it? Would you mind carrying it for me, depending on what the circumstance is? I think it wouldn't be so astonishing to find someone that says, sure, I'll help you, please. You don't have to carry it with me. I can carry it myself. Tell me which car is yours. We'll put it in the trunk. You're thirsty. I just bought myself 36 bottles of water here. Take one. Here's a drink. I'm happy to take care of you. But here's the nuance of the lesson that Rav Wuchter emphasizes. That when a person is approached to do a kindness or sees a specific need and fulfills that need, and then opens her eyes or your own eyes yourself and says, what might more I be able to do in order to improve this situation? That's the implicit detail and character that Eliezer is looking for. He's looking for a person who, even once they do a kindness, rather than patting themselves on the back, rather than saying, I'm glad I could help you, it's a little late, I've got a class to give, I got to get home, I hope you're okay. If you have any problems, call me. Here's my phone number. If you don't have a place to live tonight, let me know. Maybe we could find a place for you at home. I got to run, and is out of there. What Rav Wuchter is describing here is a person whose eyes are wide open as to what more might I be able to do above and beyond the call of duty. And then he adds a kicker. And he says, and not out of obligation, but out of a sense of wanting to grow in kindness and magnanimity. That, Rav Wuchter says, is the key to this whole story. It's really an insight which then, if you play it out in real life, it means as follows. First of all, for those of us who are educators, those of us raising our own children, sometimes as parents, we might say, something spilled in the kitchen. Can't you go in and help clean it up? What are you, just sitting there? Go help clean it up. The kid's like, yeah, sure, I'm sorry. Kid gets up, nice kid, helps clean up the mess. And they finish. And they're ready to go back to their seat. And then you could say, gosh, don't you realize that now that we've cleaned up the floor, we still have to do this, we should refill it? Oh, you're right. Okay, good, I'll do that also. That's fine. No. The key here, according to Rav Wuchter, is the nature of a person being, oh, you need my help? You're asking me for something? Let me help you. And in the course of helping you, let me assess on my own. Perhaps there's even more above and beyond what you're asking for that I can do. Perhaps there's another dimension to the kindness. Perhaps there's another way I can help you. And if there is, even though I don't feel obligated to do so, maybe I felt obligated to give you water when I see you asking me for water, but I want to do that because it'll be my growth process of becoming a greater Baal Chesed, a person who more, in our Jewish context, more resembles an Abraham and a Sarah. That's what Eliezer was astonished to see when he encountered Rivka. And that's what convinced him this is the woman who could come back, who could marry Yitzchak, and who could fulfill together with him, creating a household and having children who would perpetuate this legacy. So what does this mean for our own kids? To use the analogy before, if something spills, say, oh, please help your mom out, or let's go in the kitchen and help out together. Something spilled, let's clean it up. And then you're watching your child and you're doing it yourself, you're cleaning up and you're looking around saying, thinking to yourself, what more can I do? And let me show my child what it means, not out of obligation and not because it's a knee-jerk reaction to want to do more, just like Ephron had a knee-jerk reaction to grab as much of Abraham's wealth as he possibly could get his hands on, because that's who he was inside. Rather, I want to elevate myself. I want to train myself. I want to make myself accustomed to being a truly kindly, sensitive person who not only checks off the box of doing chesed, of doing kindness, who not only is attentive when someone asks me for a favor, but someone who's going to really tune into the situation and the plight of others, and to really give thought as to what more I might be capable of doing in order to make the world a better place for everybody, in order to perfect myself so that I should be more godly in my personality, in order to really achieve tikkun olam, to see that the world hums and operates as it really could operate. Those are the kind of things. So Rav Lichter says, as educators, as parents, and as educators of ourselves in terms of our own development, and that's true whether you're 20 or 40 or 60 or 80 or 100, the Torah here is opening our eyes to how we can measure and look within our own hearts and evaluate what are my true colors, and therefore what further steps can I do to extend the depth of my conviction and to make myself an even more lofty, more sensitive, more kindly, more compassionate human being. What can I do now to push the boundary a little bit, to go above and beyond, and to do it voluntarily, not because it's being asked of me, not because it makes me look good in the paper, not because they're going to do a commercial at halftime showing what a great guy I am, but rather just out of a sense of really wanting to give thought to how I can utilize my wisdom and my wealth and my talents and my energy and my smile and my compassion for the good of others to the best extent possible. And I just want to add a comment from something else we were learning in Mesilat Yesharim. The Vilna Gaon asked a very surprising question. And it's in his commentary. I looked it up in Mishlei and Proverbs, chapter 19, number 3, and you can see it there. The Vilna Gaon asked the question, he says, how come sometimes people seem to be intent on improving as human beings and becoming better, becoming more godlike, becoming more compassionate, becoming more kind, becoming less angry, whatever the challenge may be, and they don't seem to get enough divine assistance to succeed? You meet the same guy 5 years later and he's still the same rather selfish kind of a guy, rather angry kind of a guy, rather short with people, whatever it is why doesn't God help the person to improve? And the Vilna Gaon, quoting the sentence in Mishlei, says something very shocking. It says, you know why? Because they're trying to do it all at once. They're not coming to grips with, let me look within myself, see what are my true colors today, at this moment in time. And now as I engage with the world, what can I think of doing that will extend my reach and help me grow? So if I know I'm a particularly angry, short person, and when people bother me, I give them a hard time, let me just start by restraining myself, by just staying quiet, All right, it's a big step to just overlook insults and still be the same nice, compassionate being. I'm not there yet. And what the Vilna Gaon says is when we don't measure ourselves and we don't have a realistic understanding of ourselves, then we tend to overreach. And when we're overreaching and we're acting in a way that's not congruent with who we really are, God doesn't help us become better. It's a pretty harsh statement, really, when you think about it, because after all, I really want to be less angry. I really want to be nicer to my kids. I really don't want to have such a short fuse. So I'm going to come home and I'm going to be perfect. And then 5 years later, you're still getting annoyed at the same things. You're still blowing it. So the Vilna Gaon says, God's not going to help you then. But if you sincerely look in the mirror and say, let me call a spade a spade. I want to be honest with myself. I'm a fairly angry person. I have a pretty short fuse. So you know what? Given who I am, let me take a few steps forward in my own development. Let me push myself. So as I feel something annoying taking place, let me simply smile at the person and say, let's take a break here. I just have to make a phone call. And I really don't, but I just step outside and tell myself to calm down, count to 5. I'm going to go back in. I'm going to be more calm. I'm going to be more relaxed. I'm not ready yet to fully engage with compassion and kindness and magnanimity, but I am ready to at least curtail the shortcoming that I have in the hope that as I grow and develop, as I push beyond my boundaries that are there today, my boundaries will be extended. And hopefully God should give me enough time to live out my life where I can truly become, internally become, for the sake of heaven, become the kind of person that I really want to be. And the Vilna Gaon says that in order to do that, we have to measure our true colors. We have to see if we're in a business transaction, whether our little Ephron inside of us comes out and we say, oh, here's a chance to make a quick buck and to take advantage of a situation. And yeah, it's not about the money, but who can resist? So let's try to go beyond that. And let's negotiate differently when it comes to dealing with our own character traits. When it comes to, boy, that person is so annoying. I can't believe the person asked me to bring them food for Shabbos. Don't they know how busy I am? Okay, I'm going to bring them some food for Shabbos. Let me give a little bit more thought. Do I remember what they really like? Maybe I should call them up and say, oh, I'm happy to provide you with some food for Shabbos. Let me ask you a question. Do you like chicken or meat? Do you like fried chicken or do you like roasted chicken? Let me push beyond my natural boundaries so that I can do things with more compassion, with more skin in the game, with more of an eye-open way of assessing what the real need is and how I can best fulfill it. And let me do so in the hope and prayer that God will guide me and strengthen me and give me the opportunity to become a truly compassionate, kind, loving person. And I could begin approaching the path that Abraham and Sarah set for us in terms of being the kind of human being who lives our lives in the image of God. It's a tremendous insight from the nice, beautiful stories in this week's Torah reading. And please God, we should all take it to heart. We should all be willing to acknowledge where we're really at. And please God, be mindful of how we can push the boundaries a little bit further out so that we can grow and with God's blessing and help become really the kind of people we always would imagine. Maybe we imagine now we already are, but we would imagine that we would like to become. Thank you very much. I'm happy to answer any questions. Okay, everyone should have a good evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Good night.
Bye. Good night.